Hello, hello students. Today I'm going to discuss the pathophysiology of Parkinson disease. Parkinson disease, if we go by the name, it is based on the name of the physician James Parkinson. Actually, the physician was the one who described that this kind of a disease actually exists in the society. And he saw these kind of symptom in some patients, in old patients, and he initially named it shaking palsy or paralysis agitans. Later on, it is more commonly called as Parkinson disease. He named these shaking palsy because of the hands of the patients are shaky, okay, and there is a lack of motor coordination. That are the major features of this disease. Going to some definitions and general features of the disease. This is age-related disease. Okay, so this is the old age problem. Chronic, it is not acute, it is chronic, slow developing disease. Progressive, the disease progresses continuously. Neurodegenerative, that means there is some damage to the neurons, and this damage to the neurons is continuously taking place. The neurons are degenerated, they are damaging, and it is taking place, it is going on progressively, as it happens in the Alzheimer's disease. It is another progressive neurodegenerative disorder. So what kind of neurons are destroyed? There's a destruction of dopaminergic neurons, and these neurons are destroyed in an irreversible manner. And if we talk about the brain area, the nigrostriatal pathway is the one which is mainly affected. Nigrostriatal, there are two words, nigro and striatal. And this pathway is also called as the extrapyramidal pathway. I will discuss this one. The name nigrostriatal means this pathway starts from this substantia nigra portion. Substantia nigra, this is the brain region. It goes to striatum. Striatum, that is why striatal. And this whole area is called as basal ganglia. So this comes under the basal ganglia region. And precisely, I told there's a destruction of the neurons. Which brain area? Substantia nigra. The neurons are destroyed in the substantia nigra, from which the pathway rises and goes to the striatum. We can see this with the help of the diagram. This is the basal ganglia region. Basal ganglia. This basal ganglia has many nuclei. GP, globus pallidus, caudate putamen, putamen. Okay, so these are the nuclei of the basal ganglia. And when we say caudate and putamen, this is called as striatum. This basal ganglia, these neurons, these nuclei, they are innervated by substantia nigra. This is the substantia nigra. This pathway is called as nigrostriatal pathway. And the whole substantia nigra and basal ganglia, they combine to form extrapyramidal pathway, extrapyramidal system. So in the normal person, this pathway is intact. And there's a release of dopamine as a neurotransmitter. But what happens in the Parkinson disease is that these neurons are destroyed in the substantia nigra region. So these pathways, they become non-functional. As a result, the levels of dopamine, they are reduced. The levels of dopamine are reduced. So this is the basic problem in the Parkinson disease, biochemical change. So what are the signs and symptoms of Parkinson disease? Mainly, this is the motor symptom, motor problem, actually, movements of the body, they are actually affected. In the initial stages, there is a unilateral, that means one part of the body, one half of the body is affected, or we can say the symptoms are asymmetric, one side of the body. And what are the symptoms? Tremors, rigidity, bradykinesia or akinesia, and postural abnormalities. We can see these things, and we will discuss these things one by one later on. But there are some known motor symptoms also. Like there's excessive salivation. The person is not able to close the mouth in a proper manner. So there's a drooling, the excessive salivation. Constipation is one of the major features. Urinary incontinence. The person is not able to control the urination. He has no control on urination. So urine passes involuntary. Depression, loss of memory, dementia. So these are some non-motor symptoms. But the major the characteristic features of Parkinson is the motor movement that we are going to discuss. Motor movements, tremors, you can say shaking. These are usually the first signs. And we say tremors, these are rhythmic oscillatory movements. And mostly this is related to finger of the hands. They are mainly affected. And this is the frequency 4 to 6, not very vigorous shaking, slow shaking. And this is a characteristic word, pill rolling type of tremors. Like a person is rolling the pills between the thumb and index finger, first finger and the thumb. So he is just having the tremors between this kind of a pill rolling type of the tremors. And the tremors may get worse during the emotional stress. Rigidity, resistance to the body movement. There's a much more resistance in the body movements. So obviously, if the resistance is very high, the movements will be very slow, difficult, obviously. And a person has to do some extra effort to overcome the resistance and rigidity. So rigidity is a very important feature. Because of that rigidity, actually, there is a word akinesia. Kinesia means movement. A mean no movement, complete lack of movement. Bradykinesia. Kinesia means movement. Brady means slow. So slow movement. So because of this rigidity, basically, the resistance, rigidity, the movement gets slower and slower. Initially, there is a bradykinesia. As the disease progresses, the person will convert into akinesia. What are the signs of bradykinesia? Expressionless face, mask-like face. It's a typical feature of bradykinesia. Reason, because the muscles of the face, they are slow to contract, so he's not able to show the emotions. So this is one of the sign of bradykinesia. Posture defect. Now the person is not having a normal posture. He's a hunched position posture, cannot maintain an upright posture. And moreover, he's not having a control on the walking speed also. So the way the person is actually moving, it changes. The gait is the way of walking changes because of the resistance only, resistance bradykinesia. As the disease advances, our disease progresses, and there may be a akinesia, immobility. That means person will be on the bed and he can suffer from number of problems like pneumonia, respiratory problems, and ultimately it may lead to the death. Reason, etiology, why this happened, no clear idea. It is known that with age, actually, this kind of a thing can happen in some persons. Maybe the role of genetic factor, maybe some insecticide factor, environmental, don't know. Pesticide head injury, don't know, but there can be something. There is one chemical actually, MPTP. This is a synthetic man-made chemical, not present in the environment. But it is found that if you give this MPTP in the rats or these kind of the animals, the symptoms of Parkinson can happen. So this is one of the toxic chemical which can be reason, but obviously this is not present in the nature as such. This is man-made. Some drugs can cause Parkinsonism like symptom. That means if you give some certain drugs, then they can produce symptoms which are similar to Parkinson, like antipsychotic drugs. They block dopamine receptors, T2 receptors, and then they can produce the symptoms of Parkinson. Antiemetic drugs like metoclopramide. It can also block dopamine receptors in the brain and can produce symptoms of Parkinson's. Etiology, One of the major reason can be the we don't know the etiology. This is again a hypothesis basically. May possible dopamine metabolism is causing the problem. Why it is causing problem? Because of the development of oxidative stress. Actually, dopamine is metabolized by this enzyme, monoamine oxidase B. Monoamine oxidase B. This enzyme metabolizes dopamine to produce free radicals like H2O2, hydroxyl anion, and hydroxyl free radical. Hydroxyl free radical and hydroxyl anion. This is anion, this is free radical. So these free radicals, actually, they are normally neutralized by the antioxidants which are present in our body, like glutathione, reduced glutathione. But what happens with age, actually, may possible this glutathione is reduced in the body. And these free radicals, they are becoming more and more prominent. And they can lead to damage to the neurons. So this is one of the hypotheses that is postulated. Biochemical theories of Parkinson disease. What are the biochemical changes that happens in the Parkinson? There are two biochemical changes that are noted. Dopaminergic theory. It says there is a less of dopamine. Cholinergic theory says that there is excess of acetylcholine. So there's an imbalance between these two. So as per the dopaminergic theory, so substantia nigra, these neurons are destroyed. Nigrostriatal pathway is not functional. There's a decrease in dopamine in the basal ganglia or extrapyramidal pathway. This extrapyramidal pathway is the one which controls the muscle movement, fine movements, fine muscle movements, fine control of the motor movement, postural maintenance. And this is not working. How we can say this theory is good or it is correct? What are the sports? Because it says that dopamine is reduced. So if you try to increase dopamine in the brain, you can overcome the symptoms of Parkinson, like levodopa. Levodopa, if you give, it increases the dopamine levels and these symptoms can be reduced. Or you can give certain drugs which activate dopamine receptors. Just give those drugs. Or the drugs that reduce dopamine metabolism. If dopamine is not metabolized, the levels will be very high. And there are certain drugs which can produce deleterious effects, harmful effect. If you block dopamine receptor, the drugs blocking dopamine receptors like antipsychotic, metoclopramide, they can be harmful. Another thing that has been found is that in the patients of the Parkinson, the levels of dopamine are very high. The metabolites of dopamine are very low in the urine. Decreased metabolites of dopamine in the urine is an indicative of Parkinson disease. Cholinergic theory. It says that there is increase in acetylcholine. Particularly, it is responsible for the development of tremors. What is this sport? The drugs that block dopamine, that block acetylcholine, they can reduce the tremor because there's excess of acetylcholine. Block acetylcholine, you can overcome tremors. So this is anticholinergic drugs. They block acetylcholine receptors like benztropine. It can be useful drug for controlling Parkinson disease. So in general, in conclusion, what we can say, there's imbalance between dopamine and acetylcholine. There's decrease in dopamine and excess of cholinergic. So some key questions like which synthetic toxic molecule can cause Parkinson disease? What are the three key signs and symptoms of the Parkinson disease? You can work out on this one. Which brain area is affected in the Parkinson disease? Which neural pathway is mainly affected in Parkinson disease? What are the two main biochemical changes in the brain? What are the two drugs which can produce symptoms of Parkinson? So how you can produce Parkinson in patients by giving certain drugs. So these are some of the points that I want to discuss related to pathophysiology of Parkinson disease. Thank you.